So I'm Nancy Foxy. I'm the Executive Director for the Lapeer County Community Foundation. I think I know pretty much everybody in the room, a few new faces. We're really glad that you could be here this afternoon to spend some time really concentrating on your nonprofit work in your organization. This is the fourth in our series of nonprofit workshops, and we have been really, really excited to partner with Nonprofit Network, who's done an outstanding job facilitating each of these sessions. The series was made possible through a funding partnership of the Community Foundation, a grant from Comerica Charitable Foundation, as well as Lapeer Development Corporation and United Way of Lapeer County. So together, we were really pleased to be able to offer this series. We're looking forward to having some more opportunities into 2024. But for now, we just want to thank our funding partners and having you here. I know it's beautiful, November 14th afternoon, and it's kind of a gift. So your presence here from 4 to 7 means a lot. So we want to feed you, make sure you have plenty of cookies and candy and anything else to keep you engaged, and not focus on what's going on outside. Be sure to help yourselves. If you need to get up and move around, and I know Regina will talk about that too, but help yourself to food. The restrooms are out of these doors to the left, so make use of those. I do ask that you put your phones on silent, so if you have them, please silence them. There will be, Regina will talk about a survey. We really ask that everybody complete the survey for the session. I will also be sending around, probably in a couple weeks, a follow-up email with a different survey of what you might like to see next year. A lot of you are faces that have been to multiple of these over the last 6 months, and we want to make sure that what we plan for in the future is relevant to the work that you do, and maybe something that we haven't been able to cover, or something that you feel that we need to go into further detail with. So please look for both of those surveys and participate. Your honest feedback is very much valued to us. I can't stand before you tonight and speak without a little bit of a public service announcement for the Community Foundation. We have just launched our Giving Tuesday campaign. And anyone that's familiar with the Community Foundation, it's a big event for us every year. We change the campaign up. Our goal is not to compete with your nonprofit, but to support the work that you do. So with Giving Tuesday, we allocate $25,000 that we give out in community grants to our nonprofits through our funds that meet certain criteria in the gifts that they receive, whether it's the number of gifts, the overall donations to those funds. We have some nonprofits that are pretty highly competitive, and they want to make sure they win because the first is a $5,000 grant for the work that you do. The other, we are also designating $25,000 to cover hunger in Lapeer County. Just as your homes struggle with the price of groceries, everybody's homes are, and our food pantries, of which we have over 20 here in Lapeer County, are struggling to find food to fill their pantries to give people. This past year and a half, the foundation has funded over 6,000 pounds of ground meat, and we already have food pantries saying, do you have more protein? Because the price of meat, getting it, being able to distribute it. So for Giving Tuesday, we are very fortunate. We are matching dollar for dollar every gift to our Feeding Lapeer County Fund, and that $25,000 up to $25,000, and that will be distributed out to those food pantries in the way of protein. So that is my public service announcement. If you're on social media, you will see a lot from the Community Foundation. If you're here with a nonprofit that has a fund with the foundation, and you don't know about how the campaign can help your fund, come speak to me afterwards or on a break, and I'll help you get engaged so that you can hopefully compete for some of those awards. With no further ado, I want to introduce Regina. She has been here previously for our first 2 sessions. We're really excited to have her back tonight. She can introduce herself a lot better than I can. I feel like we're old friends, and I'm going to let her take it away.
All right, thank you. Good evening, good afternoon. How are you? Awesome. I am good. I'm amazing. Thank you. And I'm really honored to be here. My name is Regina. I'm the Executive Director of Nonprofit Network. And I am here to say in layman's terms and share some budget and financial management of your nonprofit. I am the Executive Director of Nonprofit Network. We're a capacity builder. We're not lawyers. We're not accountants. We know a lot of things because we've seen a lot of things. And so I'm going to share some best practices, but I'm going to say it again, and then I'll say it again. I'm not a CPA. In order to get out of college, I had to take accounting 3 times, okay? So that only is to say, if I can do this, if I can help lead my organization toward better financial practices, so can you. And for those of, how many of you have been to all of the sessions? Awesome. How many of you went to the board governance sessions? How many of you went to the fundraising sessions? Everything is connected, right? So everything matters. We can't just ignore one major thing like financial management of this thing that we're running a nonprofit organization. And one of the things that I said early on, hopefully I said it in this room, is that nonprofits that less than 50% of the population trust a nonprofit. You want to know why? Because we don't manage our money well. And so we need to be more transparent. Somebody asked me about that. We need to be able to speak about what it takes to run our organization more effectively, more prudently, more efficiently. And so that's kind of what this lecture is going to be about, this discussion. It's going to be engaging, lots of small group work, but it's also going to be run by you. I have slides, you have slides, I have worksheets, but this is one of the workshops where it is imperative that you tell me what you came here to learn, because where your organization is and how I can help, because I can lead us down a ton of rabbit holes, and if none of them are relevant to you, then this isn't going to be a good session. So I really want to get your list of, I came here to specifically learn about this, and I will either tell you whether I can teach you or if this is a conversation you need to have with your CPA, okay? So we're going to go around the room because we do have a smaller group today. I want you to know who's in the room, and you're going to answer these questions: your name, your organization, your job in real life. Because some of you are going to be like, I'm the finance person, and I'm the bookkeeper, and I'm learning how to do it as of last year, right? That's important information. Your role in the organization, how much you love numbers. Some of you are data geeks, some of you are numbers geeks, you just like to count your pennies. And other people are like, I know I have to learn this, but I dread this conversation. And then, why are you here? What did you come to learn? And I'm going to write it up there, and we're going to check in throughout the evening to make sure that I'm meeting your expectations. Okay? All right, so let's start over here. You can do whatever you'd like.
Hi, my name is Lisa Acton, and I am a board member on Banbury Cross, our nonprofit. We do equine therapy for veterans and disabled people. My role in the organization is I'm just a board member. On a scale of 1 to 10, my love of numbers is absolutely a -3. It's not my thing at all, and I am just here to learn everything that I can about nonprofits to be a better board member, but I'm not going to be handling money.
Awesome. You're just going to be a person that's going to ask great questions.
Right.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Patty Robinson, also with Banbury Cross Therapeutic Equestrian Center, board member. My scale of love of numbers is probably a 1, and I'm here to better learn that.
Okay, good.
I'm Tanya Frank. I'm also with Banbury Cross, and I'm the treasurer, and I do have an accounting background, so my love of numbers from 1 to 10 is a 10, and I'm here to basically learn how to organize things so that everybody doesn't get mad at me.
Awesome. Co-facilitator right here. All right.
I'm Mary Ann Harrington, and I'm also with Danbury Cross, and I love numbers, and I'm retired, and we've just got a new treasurer in her position, and we're kind of reorganizing some things and trying to make it better, and so it'll last forever.
Awesome.
Make me mad.
Okay. How not to make people mad. I'll figure that one out. I don't know if I actually have a tool for that, but also organization. Okay. You start.
I'm Lisa Super, and I'm from the Pregnancy Center of Lapeer, our whole people is. And I'm just getting out of my real job, which is nursing. The role is a board member. I really do have 6 to 7 for my love of numbers. And I'm here to learn what I don't know that I don't know.
Okay. All right. So you just want, you come away with one thing that you didn't know, and I've done a good job. Perfect.
Sherry Trombley, I'm the executive director of the Pregnancy Center. My love of numbers is about an 8, and I'm here just to compare what we do with the standard we recommend.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
I'm LaDonna Bright with the Pregnancy Center, and I'm the bookkeeper there. And my love of numbers is probably a 10, but I'm not too much of a geek. Or so I think. And I am here just to learn what will make my job easier and provide the answers that people ask me. And
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
I'm Kira. I'm a board member for the Pregnancy Center. My job in real life is a stay-at-home mom. So part of why I'm here tonight is to get a break from baby diapers.
I can offer this. I can offer this.
Being honest. Please, can I go? So I'm looking forward to engaging my brain in a little bit of a different way. Love of numbers. I would say I'm pretty good with numbers. I'm just not fast at numbers, so probably like a 7 maybe. And I'm here to learn some good questions to ask. People
Awesome.
that are, on the numbers.
I love that. Okay, next table.
Hi, I'm Debbie Lockhart. I'm the director for Holiday Depot of Lapeer County. My job in my real life is mayor for the city of Lapeer. My real life, my other half. On the scale of numbers, if I had more time, I would probably be at an 8. But I'm a little lower than that now. And I'm here to find out what I can, but also to find out what I should be doing wrong, or I should be doing better. I'm sure there's got to be lots of that.
Okay.
There's always room for improvement.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
I'm Bill Marquardt, also with Holiday Depot. My job in real life, I'm retired, so I have lots of time for volunteer work. So I don't have a job, I have a ton of jobs. I'm the secretary for Holiday Depot. And, on a scale of 1 to 10, I don't love numbers by any means at all. So that's a 0.
Okay.
But I'm comfortable with them.
Okay.
I hate them, but I'm comfortable with them.
Okay.
And then, why are you here? We've been doing this for 20 years, sort of by the seat of our pants. And it's grown into a very important role in the community. We need to start paying attention to details.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Details.
Hi, I'm Nell Popa. I'm part of the Dryden Wesleyan Church. I'm the trusteer, the guys who maintain the building. I'm now retired this year. I retired this year earlier. to be very busy. My role is, I do a lot of things with the church, so I volunteer. On a scale of 1 to 10 love numbers, since I was like 3, I've loved numbers. I'm an 11 out of 10. Wow. Numbers. I mean, that's what I used to do for a living. Why I'm here is we have a real lack of discipline in our church. We go red every month, and it won't be long before we won't have a church if we don't do things right.
Okay. So just a quick comment, and we'll talk a lot about this. So time is an anomaly, but for your fiscal year, which could be different for every single one of you, many of you might be a January to a December fiscal year, we can run in the red every single month as long as by the end of the fiscal year we've made that up. And it's a lot easier if we know all of the months we're going to be in the red so that it's planned and expected. It's not bad because many of us might get all of our money around the holidays and then spend it through the year. But if we don't know that, and it's always a surprise, then that's very uncomfortable. And the church might say, no, this is actually our pattern. We just forgot to tell our board. So now we have board members completely stressed out, but we haven't looked year over year over year and seen our roller coaster and going, this is not a roller coaster. This is our terrain. It's a rock. It doesn't move, right? And so there's a whole bunch of conversations about the reflection in the mirror that we use to foreshadow the future. And many of you are probably only looking in the rearview mirror. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sally Popa. I'm not a numbers person. I am the treasurer at Dryden Wesleyan Church, and my job in real life is I'm retired now, so it's a wonderful thing. I can take care of him now. My role in the organization is I'm the treasurer at the Dryden Wesleyan Church, and on a scale from 1 to 10, I'm probably a 2 numbers. And I'm here because I'm concerned about our church. I think we sometimes tend to think if we just pray it'll come. I do think that there's steps you can take and things you need to do that I don't know, and I need to find out what those are. So we can
Sure.
support our church.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Job in real life, I work with Birth to 3 in Lapeer County. I'm an education teacher, but I'm also teaching myself for schools and kids. They keep me busy. Role in the organization as founder. Scale of 1 to 10. Well, I went to college to be an accountant, so I really loved numbers, and then I decided I hated numbers. At like a negative. And then why am I here? Just to learn.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. So for some of us, we feel like we don't control the numbers, and therefore that feeling of always being out of control is really yucky. And so for those of you that don't love numbers, it's because they've been mean to you. And so we have to figure out how to make them our friends.
I'm Wendy Brown. I'm the director for senior programs with the Lapeer County Health Department. My role in the organization is I'm the director. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably a 6. I do like numbers, but it takes me a while sometimes with them. So why I'm here is to learn as much as I can so that I can be more effective in my role, to understand the budget better and how to stretch the dollars.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
I'm Amanda Thompson, and I'm with the Southern Links Trailway. And my job in real life, I'm retired, but I do work part-time in a manufacturing plant doing their systems. So my role in the organization is I'm the secretary. On a scale of 1 to 10, probably a 9 with numbers, as long as it doesn't involve algebra or trigonometry. I'm good at book counting.
How much grass seed do I need?
And the reason I'm here is because I've never been on a board of a nonprofit, and I need to understand the financial workings because I'm finding questions are being avoided, and that creates a problem for me.
Right. So, so for executive directors in the room, because I want to speak directly to that. Sometimes when we're asked a financial question, we're like, they're probably not going to understand the complexity of my answer, so I'm going to make it really tight, right? Like, we know I got it. And for our adult brains, that looks like a bob and weave. Like you don't know the answer. And so there is a transparency from the numbers people that is required, even if the person that we're talking to won't necessarily understand all the complexity. It is a tool of trust. And if you don't want to be micromanaged, you have to be very transparent with your numbers, period, especially with your board, specifically with your board. So having those questions to ask and then having somebody that says, I'd be happy to share my process. So, okay, good.
Susan Gilbert, Paradise Animal Rescue. My job in real life is I retired from 30 years in office manager for surgeons, but my role in the organization with Paradise is not treasurer, mainly secretary, but I do all the recording in QuickBooks and a lot of balancing. I have a lot of checks and balances. We learned some hard lessons a few years ago. Checks and balances, I love things to match up.
Yeah.
I'm real particular about that.
Okay.
And why I'm here is just to know that we think we're on the right track, and we've changed a lot of things in the last few years because of things prior to that. But it's about transparency.
Yeah.
The numbers that you have to be able to relay those, and they have to be in black and white to your board.
Yep.
Where everything goes and what everything's coming in from.
Yeah.
So it's a learning process every day.
Yep. And we learned, and all of your policies are different, but we learned in some of the last sessions is that training matters, board orientation matters. And if you're not training your board on how to read your financials, your board doesn't know how to read your financials. Because I can show you my financials, you can show the same group of people your financials, and they're going to look completely different. The reports, the chart of accounts, everything's going to be different. We won't know how the money comes in and how we spend it until we train it. And guess what? As a board member, the minute that you train me, I will forget, and you will need to train me again. And you'll need to train me again, and you'll need to retrain me when we do the budget. We're going to retrain me when we have a good year. You're going to have to retrain me when we have a bad year, because I will not remember our terrain, or if it's a roller coaster, or we're okay or not okay, and I won't understand those complexities. So the retraining and starting from scratch, slowly and deliberately during important board meetings where we're sharing this information, critical. Thank you.
Shelley Powell, Paradise Animal Rescue, retired. Numbers, I'm about a 3. I'm a process person. I love process, making things as efficient as possible. I didn't know numbers fit into that, so I have to kind of
Yes.
even screaming and kicking along the way, but why am I here? Anything that's going to help the animals, that's all I really care for, the animals. So I know all this has to fit together like a puzzle.
Yep.
Make the best of it.
Yep. Numbers help animals, I promise you. Thank you.
Janine Kaprowski, and I'm with Lapeer Sunrise Kiwanis. I'm president of the club. My job in real life is whatever somebody needs. Okay, usually family, but out in the community also. On a scale of 1 to 10, I would say probably an 8 with numbers. I like numbers. I don't like doing budgets, but that's okay. I know they have to be.
Do you like to plan?
Oh, yes.
A budget is a strategic plan.
So,
Okay?
I
So
understand that. You know, and the other thing is that my organization is a little bit older. It's getting smaller. There are fewer of us that are actually involved. So
yeah.
it makes it a little rougher. But I'm here just to learn.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
I'm Carol Paraso. Actually, I just gotten off a board after 9 years. I used to be director of Lapeer Teamwork. Then I went back and served on their board for 9 years. And I just temporarily now, I'm not volunteering, I'm temporarily on sabbatical, just considering a couple of new board positions. But I have to do some other things first before I go to the next venture. I love numbers. I love them. I'm a 12.
Okay.
Give me a budget. I love it. However, sitting on the finance committee through the years, I really, really enjoyed it. But if I am taking a little sabbatical and then considering going on to something different, I'd like to kind of see what the new challenges are. I'd like to focus on flags up and, as you mentioned, training, because everybody's different.
Yep.
And I want to be able to, if you don't have a CPA or a banker on your board, and the board needs to work very, very closely with your executive director,
Yeah.
you really need to bring something to the board so that everybody is understanding.
Yeah.
And I know things are changing in this world.
Yep.
I would like to know what flags to be aware of, what challenges, what do I really need to focus on? And so stepping back a little bit and then going on to something new gives you that opportunity.
Okay. Good. Thank you. I need to say this. Many bankers have no idea how to be a CPA or a bookkeeper. Just because they work at a bank does not mean they have I can get a job at a bank, okay? Doesn't mean that I can do anything with money. I can make all my dollar bills go the same way. I can put them in piles of 10, but that's about it, okay? So just recognize that the place you work doesn't necessarily give you the expertise you need. We all know that.
Nancy Berrios. I'm with the Cass City Historical Cultural Center and Museum. And my job in real life, I knew Carol because I used to work at the bank 100 years ago.
So you know.
My more recent position was HR manager in a brand foundry. Retired now. That was rough, let me tell you. I'm retired now. My son has an office, so sometimes I go in and volunteer with him. And I do a lot of volunteer work. And that's how I came into this position, was the EDC director called and said, hey, I've got a project. I need a couple people. Will you step up to the plate? I'm currently the vice president. I'm not responsible for the finance, but the two ladies that both are still working. And so I'm here to take back some information to them. Scale of 1 to 10 with numbers, probably a 5.
Okay.
Tolerate them.
Yeah. And so you mentioned HR. This is a perfect time to recognize that HR and finance go together. That's why a lot of HR directors are also finance managers, because we have all of the benefits of your employees are an accounting function. Their PTO, their medical benefits, their holiday pay, their overtime, like all of that is a financial ramification that needs to be managed, and the HR department needs to work in concert with the budget department and the finance department to make sure that those things are all aligned. Okay.
All right. I'm Warren Short, excuse me, Short's Fawn Rescue. Job in real life, I'm retired, but I've taken up homesteading as the first love. I should have been doing that my whole life. I love gardens and orchards and livestock, and I do it all. And it's a great fun, but I've started this fawn rescue, and so now I've got a whole new world that I'm trying to learn. Role in the organization, right now I'm founder and president because we're still building our board and things like that. Excuse me. Scale of 1 to 10, probably a 9. I like numbers. I'm pretty good with numbers. But if I'm honest, if I spend my time with numbers, I spend too much time with numbers. So I try not to spend more time than I have to. Why am I here? We're a brand new startup. We're not even a year old. I know nothing about accounting and finance and that kind of stuff, so I need to learn.
Okay. I'm going to teach you enough to be dangerous and probably not much more. I set my alarms. We're going to have a break at 5:15 and 6:15. When my alarm goes off, I'm going to jump. Because I won't expect it, but I wanted you to know that I know that you need a break and I'll give you a break. And then I wrote down not only notes here, but I wrote down notes over here around what I want to tell you and how I want to address all of this. And again, from just the introductions, I hope that you recognize this is complicated. And depending on your size and scale and scope and life cycle, you may need to hire additional help and skills to really get deep into the conversations you need to get into, okay? And it all matters because right now, some small grassroots organizations are working on a cash basis, and large organizations like the health department is probably working on the accrual. You raise your hand if you know what I just said. Okay, so the generally accepted accounting practice is accrual accounting. At home, we use cash accounting, modified, right? So we know how much money we're bringing in, and we know exactly how much money, hopefully, we have to spend on our bills and how much is left over. But we're not actually tracking things like depreciation. Like, how much is it gonna, we're not putting away money, most of us probably aren't, for our heater when it goes out. But nonprofit accounting, business accounting, says that every asset that I owe is also being depreciated, and I'm setting aside money so that when I have to replace it, it's actually in the bank. Or, you know, because there's cash flow and you know. But there's this thing about foreshadowing and forecasting, and that the money that's in my bank account, I'm going to use round numbers, the $10,000 that's in my bank account, in accrual accounting, that's actually not there because I have debts and I've already accounted for those debts in my checking account for this month through the next year, potentially. And so it's a very different way of thinking versus cash to accrual accounting. Which is, accrual accounting is how much PTO is somebody going to take that I'm going to have to pay them. And if your staff works on a widget basis, I'm going to go back to the health department. Sorry about that. So every time one of my staff members shows up in a room and teaches a class, we get paid by the state. Awesome. Well, I can calculate that that person can do that 352 times a year, right? Well, not really, because there's holidays. Okay, so we'll back that out. But this person wants to take a vacation. So if I put this person out of that room and they're not getting paid, how does that money get accrued and how does that money get generated? And so there's a whole bunch of ways that we think about these really complex tasks. I meant to confuse you. I did a good job. Okay, so for those of you that want to know good questions to ask, we are all, if you are on a board, you are all stewards of the money. It is your sole purpose. If you were, remember, the IRS is the one that gives you your tax exemption. The IRS is the one that wants to manage your money. The IRS is the one that said a board must help manage the money. That was the whole board governance, right? So you're required to manage the money. And then we added a whole bunch of other duties But we have to watch the money because the money and the things that the nonprofit organization owns is owned by the community, okay? Which is why you wouldn't want to give your house to the nonprofit organization. Because once he deeds his house to the nonprofit organization, the community owns it. You lose that asset as an individual. So there's a whole bunch of community assets that we manage. We're managing the money on behalf of our neighbors. So can one person do this alone? Can you manage the money alone? No. Anybody ever heard of segregation of duties? Right? We don't leave one person alone in a room with the money to make sure that the money is put where it's supposed to be. Not because that person is not trustworthy, it's because we want a CYA, cover our assets, right? We can't have one person making a clerical mistake and not getting double checked. That could have huge ramifications. So financial management is a team sport, and we need the people that love the numbers. We need the people that hate the numbers asking really good questions about, I don't know the right answer to this, but why do we have all this money sitting in the bank and then we're claiming that we're poor? Why are we not using our reserves to manage growth within the organization? If we have all of these reserves, why aren't we paying our staff better? All of you people that don't like numbers, those are your questions. How do we use the money that we have to make sure that our people are being served? That's easy. And how do we make sure that we can do it again and again and again and again? How many of your organizations have a finance committee? So not very many. So I think I saw 3. Okay. So tell me, for those of you that don't have a finance committee, let me make sure I'm not getting ahead of myself. I am going to get ahead of myself. I'll ask that question in a minute. I've already talked about how the size of your organization and the life cycle of your organization matters. Having $10,000 is a much different conversation than having $1 million, right? Who gives you that money makes a lot, matters a lot, because who gives you the money might mandate how that money is spent or how it's used, or whether or not you need an audit or not. So your life cycle, your growth, your governance expectations. Some of you are going to be required licensing requirements. Some of you are going to have to provide different reports to the public. All of that stuff matters. And trust and accountability. So if you're a community foundation, your expectation of how you manage money is much different than the fawn rescue, right? There's an expectation on the community. So all of this stuff matters. And for some of you, like the stuff that I'm going to talk about doesn't apply to you because you're too small or because you're too big. We talked in other workshops about these duty of diligence, loyalty, obedience, and the business judgment rule. So the business judgment defense rule is an additional law that board members can use to protect themselves, little superhero cape, that if you're having really good generative conversations and using your policies to make decisions, that if something goes wrong, the Attorney General will typically rule in your favor, the board's favor, because you had a really good conversation. You acted in good faith. You had all of this information that you utilized, and you made a really good decision. How many of you remember that board that I talked about in one of the earlier sessions that was found guilty of doing nothing? You remember that? So there was a board that was found guilty for doing nothing. And every single board member in the original judgment, this is meant to scare you, was fined $1 million. And it was because that board knew that the people managing the money didn't know how to manage the money. And they did nothing. And so there's conversations about using good business judgment and making sure that the decisions are documented and you're using data to help you make decisions around your financial management. So, asking good questions. Raise your hand, my question askers. Yes, yes, yes. Good. This is your job, right? You're forcing the board into having really critical conversations and making sure that there's robust conversation and decision making around the financial management. That's your job, okay? Because the money people have it, or they might be, again, just looking in their rearview mirror instead of using the information to forecast and foreshadow. All right. Some of you already said what's keeping you awake. Some of the red numbers. Sustainability, how to manage it all. Is there anything else that anybody wants to share about something that's keeping you awake at night around your financial management of the organization?
Mine is because while I'm asking those questions, I'm not getting any answers. I'm getting a walk away, and that's it. The more it happens, the more it's eating at me.
Yeah, yeah. So again, data is numbers don't lie, right? Especially if they're, again, hear me out. If they're put in the right place and they've been double checked, the numbers don't lie. Did we make money or are we losing money? Do the programs have sustainability? Are we going to be successful over the year? Do we have enough money to pay for the things that we need to pay for? And this is why financial management matters. Because if our teams live in fear and not know the answer to that, it's really hard to do a good job, right? Financial safety, you've heard me say this before, the only thing that delivers our mission are the people that are around us delivering mission. Mission doesn't get delivered any other way except by humans delivering our mission. Can you come up with any example of anything else? Sometimes we can say our website is a program, but a person built the website, right? So if our people live in fear that their job is going to get cut or they don't have enough money to do the things that they need to do, what does that do to the impact of our mission? Right? So we have to be able to use the money to tell a story that says we're safe. And we also know that some of our partner organizations that might rely on us, if we're speaking a story of our ship is sinking, our partners are going to say, we need safe partners because you're a part of our mission impact, and if you're not safe, we're not safe. So money tells that story. Money tells that story in a way that nothing else can when it comes to safety and security. And so we have to be able to make sure for our donors, for our grants, for our community, for our staff, and for our clients that the numbers tell the story of safety and security.
Years ago, we were lucky sometimes enough to have 2 CPAs on our board, plus our bookkeeper and auditor. And they would be proficient in pointing out things monthly. Look, we've got to watch out for this. We're a little light here. We've got to go back. And that worked well with the executive director. Sometimes boards don't know what to ask.
Yeah.
And they depend on that. And when it's not there, they don't ask anything. They just go by what's given. So that can be a little bit of a problem too. Until and unless something major comes up in here, then you're really, we are
So there are a couple of really good questions, and this is not a question that a CPA is going to ask, right? But but here's some questions. There's a ton of them in the slide deck. What does it cost us? Some of these questions aren't relevant to your organization. Everything I say today has an asterisk. What does it cost us per hour to operate? So sometimes you can take your total expenses and a 40-hour work week for 52 weeks a year, 2,080 hours. Sometimes you can do that simple math, and that works out to be your hourly cost. Some of your programs might need an hourly cost. How much does it cost to run this program every single time we do it? Maybe it's a daily cost that works better for you, but knowing what it costs to be you and then understanding how that hour gets funded, who's paying for that hour, how many hours are unfunded for the year, like we've been able to allocate or figure out how to pay for 50% of our hours or our days so far. We haven't figured out how to pay for the rest of it, right? Or it's got to come from grants. But understanding what it takes to be you and then drilling down into programs or services or whatever so that you can determine what makes a profit, what generates more, what generates less, what is underfunded, what is overfunded, and how all those things can contribute. So that's not a CPA question, right? But that is an executive director question that says that if you're an executive director and are like, I don't know where the money's coming from and I don't know where it goes, spending time figuring out how much widgets cost, and you define the widgets, whether it's a day, whether it's a program, whether it's a person, how much does that cost and where is that money coming from? Okay, so that's a great strategic conversation that will help your board understand how the money works within your organization. If you're doing earned revenue, that's a simple math problem to figure out how much you should be charging for some things, right? You can simplify that, you can make it as complicated as you want, but that might be a good conversation to have with your organization. Good? Okay. Anybody else have anything else that keeps you awake? Do you think if you asked that question of your organization, they could go, huh, maybe I can give you that number? Okay. Then simple math, right? If you guys are open longer than normal business hours, use a different calculation than 2,080 hours. But 2,080 hours is something that is a number you should have in your head. Because if you want to figure out how to increase the hourly wages of the staff that you work for, it's $1 times 2,080, right? That's how much it costs to give your staff a raise. And then you just multiply differently, okay? Okay, so here's the basic requirements, the baseline that you should have within your organization to manage your finances well. At some point, you need to move beyond Excel. Excel is not going to give you the reporting functions that you need to stop looking in the rearview mirror and be able to look ahead. So QuickBooks. 80% of nonprofits use QuickBooks. Peachtree is also an opportunity for you, but it is far too complex. It is mainly used by CPAs, accounting firms. QuickBooks has a nonprofit what's it called? Version, thank you. And right now on TechSoup, it's $50. You need to have people that understand where to put the money, how to code it in QuickBooks. So having somebody that can understand the chart of accounts, I almost brought you a chart of accounts, but a sample chart of accounts is 9 pages. I didn't think you needed it. You can look it up. But you should have a chart of accounts. And so who knows what a chart of accounts is? Okay, for those of you that don't, it is a list of accounts that you use to bill things to or code revenue to. It's a consistent reference list, and then your budget aligns, has the same chart of accounts, the same descriptions, and then as you want to look at budget versus actuals, you're using a consistent document, reference list, to be able to code things year over year over year. So you can go back and say, what did we spend on office supplies 3 years ago and how has that changed? Because you're coding everything the same, you have a consistent reference document to look back over and to use for planning and predicting. You can make pretty graphs. How has office supplies changed over years? Look, in 2020, we didn't buy any. Wonder what happened in 2020. So when we look at those things, we can also go, okay, here we are about, maybe we're in, maybe we're going into a recession, I don't know. But if we had the documentation of 2008, 2009, 2010, 11, and 12, we can say, what happened to our income there? Is there any way that we could look back 10 years ago and use some kind of crystal ball to determine if we're going to be okay now? What would we do differently? What are the ways that we addressed that very different problem then? But what are the things that we might be able to look at and look forward? Excel is not going to give you that. So if you begin to use QuickBooks, use an accounting software, you'll be able to pull the reports and learn a lot about yourselves. Okay? Questions? Okay. So we're about to go into a breakout. I want you to talk at your table, and I want you to ask these questions. What financial wisdom have you amassed within your organization, board, table, or staff? What resources do you have? I want you to identify the gaps and how you might address those gaps. We've talked about board recruitment, we've talked about professional development, we've talked about sharing resources between organizations. Some of you know of an organization in your community that has an amazing bookkeeper that's, might not be that busy that they couldn't spend an hour or two looking at your books and looking at your finances. So those are all opportunities. So I want to give you 8 minutes, because I just looked at my watch, and it's going to ring in 15 minutes. So I want to give you 8 minutes for this table conversation. We'll come back, we'll kind of debrief, and then you'll get a break. Okay? Okay. How did you grade yourself? Great? A grade? And what did you find yourself at?
Oh, what would you think? Since we're all the same, what would you think? Beginning college?
Beginning college? Awesome. First year of college. How many of you are still in elementary school? Kindergarten. What were some of the things that you were talking about at your table? What are some of the assets that you have? Yes, you are. Yes, you are. A rare breed. What were some of the assets that you were able to utilize?
Board makeup, making sure that you've got the right board members that do have some financial experience in different areas, so they're more apt to be able to ask questions.
Ask and explain. Yep. What were some of the things that you found you needed? Money. Open communication.
Board training on reading a budget
Yeah. And it's, I mean, it could be days, right? Like, meaning that to really understand all the funding sources and what their requirements are, that could be days. So there needs to be an agreement on the board level, how much information do we need in order to be effective, right? And so if you don't feel effective in your decision making because you don't have enough, you certainly don't want to be inundated with a fire hose, but you need to recognize I am not capable of making decisions on the well-being of the organization without more data, right? More information. And maybe it's a document that your team makes that explains it all, and it's a cheat sheet that's attached to every board packet. You know, this money does this, we have to use it this way, this is restricted, this is unrestricted, stuff like that. Remember during our fundraising course, I talked about restricted and unrestricted dollars, right? And so a restricted gift, if I write a check and in the memo it says for blankets, as a nonprofit, am I allowed to spend it on anything but blankets? No. So that's a restricted gift. And if somebody comes and says, show me the blankets, because your bank account's dry, where's the blanket, right? Then I have to come up with that receipt. If it's an unrestricted gift, and if I didn't promise to spend it on anything, I can spend it on anything I'd like, right? Our earned revenue, I can spend it on anything I like. We earn that. If I write a grant for a program, I have to spend those dollars on that grant from that grant on that program. I can't spend it anywhere else. So sometimes your financials look like you have tons of money, but you're poor because you have all restricted dollars that you can't use anywhere else for anything else. You have to be able to understand all of those ramifications.
You know, there's another element that not every nonprofit has, but in ours, or my former one, we have to do a 3-year accreditation.
Yes, licensing.
We had to qualify and identify and be transparent exactly. If they ask to see a document, we have to have it. We have to verify that what we said we did. I mean, it was, and we paid for this.
Yes.
It was very costly, but it allowed us to continue in that venue, which keeps our feet to the fire, you know, and helps us.
Right. And when you hear your executive director or your fund developer say, you come to them and say, hey, you should apply for this grant, and you hear them say, not in a million years would I apply for that money. I don't care, right? I'm going to, CDBG dollars. Anybody familiar with Community Development Block Grants? The reporting requirements on that will spend the money before you've done anything with it. The requirement to collect the demographics on every single person that money touches, their address, their race, their age, their mother's maiden name, so you'll see a lot of nonprofits say that money's not worth it because of the accreditation, the licensing, the strings attached to that. And so I mean, again, this is all the budgeting function. And when we have some of that money as a board member, hey, we're applying for a grant, some of the good questions to ask are, what are the reporting requirements? And do we need other money to fulfill what we just promised? A lot of foundations will say, hey, will you accept less money? Yes, I will accept less money. If you don't go back to that grant, to the foundation, and say, this is how I've amended my budget and my outcomes, you are beholden to a $100,000 grant that they just said, could you do it for 10? And somebody said yes, and now you're doing it for 10,000 instead of 100,000. So knowing how much it costs you and the ramifications and the strings attached to the dollars, very important, very, very important. And that's not CPA language, right? That's financial knowledge, right? Okay. My alarm's going to go off in 1 minute and I'm not going to jump. There it is. All right, so you need 10 minutes? Okay, take 10 minutes, go potty really fast, come back. Get some more pizza. You all look like you're back. So I'm going to go ahead. We created this, this tool, and Nancy's going to remind me to send it to all of you. And we call it a management map. And this is a tool that we used in response to executive directors saying, you know, my board micromanages me and I need them to stop. And board members going, you know, my gut feels funny about all of this and I just don't know why, but I just like, it just feels like we're getting questions that aren't getting answered, and like, I don't know whether or not we should step in or if I should step away, but something doesn't feel right. And so we created this graphic to help explain our answer, because our answer is, are you micromanaging inappropriately? It depends. Should you leave the board? It depends. Should you step in and provide more oversight and question more? It depends. So we talk about this, this idea that high trust, verified, that you have a lot of data that backs up that you can have high trust, means that you as a board member, you as a board, don't have to provide such intensive oversight to the process. What we're trying to explain here is that if there's ample trust, then check yourself and back off. Like if everything is documented, and I want to talk about some of those tools that you use to say everything's documented, I'm overreacting, or I now see that nothing is appropriate, and I am not overreacting, and I have a duty to step in closer, okay? And so, again, I'll send this to you, but here are some examples of tools of trust. So your financials are accurate, communicated clearly, understandable to you, that people in the community, clients, staff members say, I love it here, everything's going well, right? That your evaluations, whether it's board meetings run well, board assessments, performance evaluation, all come back with scores that are appropriate and data-driven for you. That all of the policies and procedures are being adhered to, that when you do a spot check, we're like, look, we're following this policy to the T. That the soft skills, that you trust the people around you, that they have integrity, that they're demonstrating competence, that you have metrics of reputation, the number of donors is increasing, the number of volunteers is increasing, your budget is appropriate, income is increasing, and that when you check, your legal and ethical compliance is being followed. That's your data that you use to say, we're okay. If all of that stuff is missing, then you say, I have a right to step in, I have a responsibility to step in and ask different questions and demand different answers. Does that make sense? So so it's not just like, some of us are like, what is my gut telling me? You can use this list to help identify what your gut is telling you. And it could be, I just want to know more. I love it so much, I want to know every little piece of little information. I want to hug it and tight it and just love it, right? If that's you, back off, man, right? If you're like, no, I don't have any of this, I see no evidence of any of this, you have a right to step in and go, I am legally obligated to ask these questions and get this data. So on the other side of the document, is two examples of an organization. One, the financials are always wrong, they're always late, they're always missing information. There's disparities and discrepancies in the budget, and no one can explain them. And the audit that we had indicates high areas of concern. That requires you to act, and so you must have higher oversight. The organization B, financials are provided timely and they're always accurate. The executives and the leadership always have an answer that makes sense. If there's a discrepancy, it's clearly documented and explained. The audit is clean. You're okay, right? You have the data. Is this helpful to you? Okay. So you as a board, here's a critical piece. You as a board should collectively decide what your tools of trust are and communicate what those tools of trust are to your executive director. It's not fair that your executive director doesn't know what you're using to determine whether or not they're trustworthy. Because if they knew that you were like, listen, financials are a big deal to me, they should be accurate, and if they're not accurate, I'm worried that you're embezzling. Your executive director would be like, whoa, okay, got it. Here's the expectations. You want the financials done a week before the board meeting. Guess what? We're going to have to change the board meeting date, or you're going to have to get financials a month behind because our board meeting is the first week of the month. There's no way I can have financials from 4 days ago and give them to you and have them accurate and timely. So we got to figure that out, right? So you begin to negotiate what those tools of trust are and whether your executive can comply with that. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, how was your break? Good. Okay, so here we are back on the slides. One of the things that you, whoops. I'm going to skip the slide when I get to it because I keep wanting to ask and I haven't. So for those of you that do not have a finance committee that is managing the financials of your organization, I'm going to predict one of two occurrences is happening at your board. And both of them are going to drive you crazy. So the first is if you don't have a finance committee, then 75% of your board meeting is taken up by financial oversight. Raise your hand if that's the case. If you don't have a finance committee and it's not 75% of your board meeting, it's probably an insert to your board packet and never discussed. Raise your hand if it's that. Does your your treasurer give you a 3-minute overview? Like, what are you doing without a finance committee? Are you having any financial conversations?
During our board meetings, we pass out the financial reviews, the income that comes in, and it's all printed up. What is for office, what is for your mailings, what is for supplies.
Yep.
Gifts we purchased, and everything's there. And our board would ask questions. We did questionnaire, it was like $7,000 for an office. And we go, one of our board members said, oh, what's happening here? Well, it was put in the wrong category. We just go through it.
So I can guarantee you 100% of the time that if you do not have a finance committee, that all you're doing is looking behind you. Where did we spend the money? Where did we get the money? And is it put in the right place? There is no strategic conversation about any futuristic conversations about risk management, use of reserves, pending changes in income, predictions, projections, 2 or 3 years away from now, what does it look like? Guarantee you 100% are not doing that without a finance committee. And that is the most important work that your organization can do. Because what you're doing without a finance committee and just looking in the rearview mirror is zero around sustainability, growth, and planning. And right now, in 2023, 24, that is all we should be doing because it is so precarious in terms of world economics, national economics, who's going to have money, the fluctuations in our accounts in the stock market. How many of you realize that most foundations have to give out 5% of their proceeds over a rolling 24, some 2 years, 5 years? What do you think the last 2 years are going to do to foundation giving in 2 years? How is that going to impact you? What are you going to do about it? That is not a question for a CPA. Those are financial management conversations looking into the future. So that is critical. You need a team, even if they're not financial managers, that are saying, okay, what's going on with our money and with our budgeting and with our forecasting? And that would be a significant to-do list. If you don't have any committees, I'm okay with that. Except you have to have a group of people that are going to have substantial, generative conversations about your financial health and about mitigating your risk. I'm okay with them looking at financial reports, as long as they're accurate, and using those as tools for this conversation, but you got to have a finance committee that's looking at all of these things. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Make sense?
Can you do just a quick thing? When I came to the fundraising one, I went back at our next board meeting. I had a big display board. I took the breakout thing. I had it limited to 24. Our board meetings are, they're elderly and their attention span can be shorter and sometimes, and they want to get home. So I took and I made this display board, and I kind of lost that. I'm like, look, and I gave them all the statistics are staggering, blah blah blah, and they started giving me pushback about having events, and I said, okay, great. So you're financially sustainable on this trail for at least the next 3 years. Well, we're not saying that. And I said, what's the plan? Where did she come? I was waiting for them to vote me off and to say, we got to get rid of her. She's asking too many questions. But I said, just say, I want you guys to look me in the eye and say, we are financially stable, and I'll back off of this, and I'll stop being up till midnight making my little posters. I'm done. They wouldn't do it. So that's a great example of not looking to the future. We are looking in the rearview mirror.
So that's also a really good example of when we recruit board members that we're recruiting for I don't want to say soft skills, but we have to have visionaries. We have to have people that are focused on today and detail-oriented, like people that like structure and policies. Those are really critical people to have on the board. But also people that hate that stuff and only want to dream and think really big. And this person has to really respect this person's role, and this person has to really respect this person's role, because on a board, both are necessary and required, right? You've got to have somebody that's going, let's think differently. Let's figure this out. We've got 6 months of reserves. What can we do to make it 12 or make more money or do something, right? So we've got all of this. What are we going to do with it? And then we need to have somebody say, wait, We have to save that. We have to keep that. Okay, how are we investing? What is the return on those things, right? Okay. Okay, big conversations. We're okay. So back to mechanics. In order for you to be able to manage your money, one, look in the rearview mirror, but also look forward. You have to have all of this stuff in the same place, which is why Excel doesn't necessarily work. You need a tool that will allow you to see different reports. So you need to have your budget. You need to be able to compare your budget to your actual, okay? Same, and this is simple, but the thing that you named in your budget needs to match what it says in your accounting software. It can't be office supplies in one place and paper in another, right? You need a consistent documentation. All expenses known in the future and spent, that's accrual. So what we just signed a 5-year lease. We need to know that that lease is 5 years. We need to know that we have that encumbered for the next 5 years. We have to know that we've promised staff that we're going to pay them every single month this month, right? What contracts, what agreements, what promises have we made? All in one place. All income, all accounts payable. What is our bills this month? What are our bills going to be next month? What are our bills going to be in 6 months? Because that's going to tell us cash flow. We have $100 in the bank. We have $200 in bills. Where's the other $100 coming from, right? And if we're just looking in the rearview mirror, we don't have that information in front of us. So all bank and credit card balances, we need up-to-date information that we can retrieve regularly. If you are working on less than 45 days of cash, you cannot produce quarterly financial reports, right? You need more up-to-date current information that will allow you to act quickly. If you don't have accurate information, you cannot act quickly. And we'll talk about what acts that might be. Like, we're not going to buy that. We're not going to hire that person. Or we're going to hire more people because when we hire more people and get in more rooms, we get paid more, right? So we need to understand the impact of our earned revenue on staff and capacity versus just cutting salaries out, right? And then we need historical information, and we need to be able to compare all of that. And so that's where, you know, some of you might say, I like numbers, but I spend too much time with them, because you're looking at all of this, but you're learning your organization. Now, does every single board member need this information? Some of you with the negative accounting love don't need this information. It's okay that you don't live with this information, that you don't put these financial reports underneath your pillow and just hug them at night. You don't need that. But somebody within the organization needs to know and love these numbers and be able to speak eloquently on what these numbers mean to the organization. So you need to have somebody that gets it and that can explain it to others. Make sense? Any questions so far? Okay.
I do just clarification. So you may not need to know all the numbers, but you have to know kind of the net. You know, you have to know where things, as a board member, you can't be the person that doesn't know what's going on. Someone you have to at least know enough about the financials as to whether there's something that needs to be done.
So, yes, and I'm on the board of a credit union, and I am very transparent, and the entire board knows it's not my strength. I'm not here to be able to look at those financial reports and see what's wrong. That's not my value to the organization. But I have to be able to speak that and be very transparent about what I don't understand so that I can rely on my other board members to go, what way do you want me to vote on this? I have questions. I have theories about what I see, but I don't understand basis points at all, right? So if there's this huge financial conversation, I'm looking around the room and they're looking at me going, are you comfortable to vote? I'm like, if you guys are comfortable in voting, then I can lend my voice to this. But but any board has to have that ability for you and me to know what my strength is and what your strength is. And if you're uncomfortable, I'm uncomfortable too, right? But if you're totally fine and I know that you sleep with the numbers and that you're totally in love with the numbers and you're totally jazzed, then I have, like that's the, that I'm not going to micromanage this committee of one. And I'm not going to micromanage this committee of one. I'm, the event cheerleader. That's my committee. Don't micromanage me, right?
So I'm going back to the example where everyone was fined $1 million.
Yes.
So everyone's just as responsible.
Well, on
But if they're
appeal,
thinking that-
it ended up being 3 board members, not the whole board. But still.
Usually, though, if you have a finance committee,
Yes. Yes.
that's the responsibility. They meet, then they're supposed to report.
Yes.
And that gives credibility and comfort to the board that, okay, they've looked at this, they are reporting their findings, they can suggest, yes, we're going to accept
They're going
this
to
or no.
make a recommendation.
And normally
Exactly.
those would be the people, perhaps, you could question. And
Exactly.
help explain things, but of course, if you don't have finance.
If you don't have committees, then we're all acting as one with no deep dive into anything. But you're right, that's board culture, right? And board respect. This committee went off and did their work for 6 months and comes back with a 2-page executive summary and a recommendation. We're either going to send it back to committee or we're going to accept their recommendation. That's it. Those are the 2 options, right? What's the point of having the committee? Right. Okay. I'm getting all excited. All right. So you need all of this in one place. How many of you can say that you have all of this in one place? One drawer. So let's look at an example. So many of you are probably looking at 1 month at a time, right? So can you tell me whether or not this organization is okay? It's April. Total income is $78,000. The budget, income is $78,000. The budget was only $31,000. They made $46,000 extra bucks this year, this month. They're 246% above budget. I don't know. Are they okay though? It's 1 month, right? Okay. So now let's look at. We're not 246 above budget. We're only 115% above budget because we had some timing issues. So being able to look at 1 month is a very different picture than looking at your year to date. And you have to be able to compare those and then ask, why is it different than budget? What is our budget? I told you before. What is our budget? Our budget is a strategic plan. It's an expectation about where money is coming from and how we're going to spend it. And because you're really, really good at what you do, you have created a budget that's not just year in total, but you've actually estimated what January's income and expenses are going to be, what February, what March, what April, what May, so that you know and can predict, are we having a month where we're going to lose revenue? It's fine, we predicted it. We figured out how we're going to pay for that month either before or after that, right? So when we look at all of the months in a row, we can say, okay, our total income, right, was, our budget was 362. We came out ahead, 387, but some of these months it was a little dicey, right? So being able to look at that and project, really critical. This takes time, right? You need a lot of data because I don't want you to take your monthly budget and divide every category by 12. I want you to think about when your fundraising events are going to be, when those ticket purchases are going to come in for that event. When are the expenses due? In the month during the event or the month after the event? I want you to be able to see when that cash flow is occurring so that you can plan and predict. Your budget is a plan. Some of you can get really good at planning where there's no discrepancies, where your budget is 100% of what the actual is. Wouldn't that be amazing? How fun. You number people, that's the goal, that your plan comes true. Okay, we already talked about that. I think you should have a finance committee. And I think it should be filled with really smart people. I think that finance committee should be an hour every single month, or at least quarterly. And I think you should be talking about a lot of things. So the committee is going to analyze that budget. This is all reflection stuff, right? This is all budget versus actual and the balance sheet. What's the difference between budget versus actual and a balance sheet? What information does a balance sheet give you? Anybody? Assets and liability. How much is my organization worth? And what debts do I have? It's a great tool. Most of your grant applications are asking for a balance sheet. Your bank reconciliations, cash flow projections, accounts receivable and payable. That's the normal stuff. And then this. So 15 minutes of your hour meeting should be on rear view mirror stuff. And 45 minutes should be on future stuff. Where is our, go ahead.
The finance committee is a great committee to have community volunteers
Yes.
that are not on your board. So if you're lacking expertise on your board or people that are comfortable with it, get someone to volunteer to be on your finance committee. Ours only meets quarterly, so it's less involved for people, and so we just have community resources that don't have to take on this.
Yep.
And they're an outside lens too, which is really nice.
So your finance committee is going to help assess risks. Like, what funding might not occur next year? How would we replace that? Might look at insurance coverages. You know, we have an awful lot of insurance for a vehicle that's now 15 years old. Maybe we don't need all of that. If it gets in an accident, it's only worth $2,000 or $3,000 now. We should lower the insurance on that, right? Your finance committee could actually help determine whether or not you can afford to pay your executive director more. They could be looking at forecasts. They could be saying, hey, maybe we can pay the entire staff more. Or maybe we could start affording benefits. What would it take for us to afford more benefits for our staff to retain good people? This is the committee that would do those forecasts and figure that out. Are we advocating for spending or savings? How many of you have more than 6 months of reserves in the bank? Why? You don't have to answer, but your board should be able to have an answer. Why do we have that much? Why aren't we reinvesting in our mission? What would it take to reinvest in our mission? So your finance committee is going to advocate for spending or savings. Understand the impact of the strategic plan. How many of you have a strategic plan? So, an old strategic plan. So if you have a strategic plan, there's multiple things in there that need investment. How do we accomplish that? That strategic plan needs to be put in front of the finance committee to determine how those things get implemented into the budget. And then understand which funding streams are at risk or safe. This is the value of a finance committee and the true conversations that a good board should be having. Okay, I'm not going to ask you to grade them because you don't have them. Okay, I missed a slide in here. I was going too fast. How often should your board be looking at your financial reports? How do you know? How do you know how often they should review those? So I'm going to ask why. How do you know that they should be reviewed monthly?
Well, you'll get the trend. You'll see year to date. You can see whether you're tracking to or not tracking.
So my only pushback is that if your financial statements look the same every single month, then you can, even if they're in the red, they don't look any different. And so let's have a different conversation, because I can observe them, okay, we've been given them, but we don't have to discuss them every month if they're the exact same financials that we got last month, right?
We review them, but we never discuss them.
Oh, okay, so there you have it. But if every single month our financial reports are completely different than last month, right? We're not talking about terrain, we're talking about roller coaster, and every month is a surprise. If that's your situation, then you need to be looking and reviewing at the financials monthly to understand what that information is telling you, right? And there's a big difference of receiving, yes, I observe a piece of paper with numbers on it. Excellent. Then really understanding what's going on on that piece of paper, and understanding if there's an action we should take. And there is mitigation, like you mentioned that we're in the red every month. And we don't have a plan. So there are two conversations to have, right? How do we raise more money, or how do we decrease expenses? And how do we decrease expenses without impacting mission? What are those opportunities? And we should have that conversation on a sunny day instead of a rainy day. What would we cut? Great conversation to have with your board. What expenses would we cut if we are ever in trouble? And might need to be a closed session, because you might say, we decrease a couple of positions. We would have to do that. Or we decrease benefits. Or we would, instead of everybody going 40 hours, we would drop everybody to 35 hours, right? You would start having those brainstorming conversations of how would we mitigate and get to a balanced budget. So that's the conversation, right? If we have determined we cannot make any more money than we're currently making, we have to figure out how to mitigate the expenses. Okay. Does anybody want to talk about mitigating expenses? Because I know you talk about raising more money all the time. Do you want to talk about mitigating expenses? Okay. 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 Before I get to this, has anybody heard of the nonprofit profitability matrix? It's something I'm a little in love with. Okay. So have you heard of the triple bottom line for nonprofit organizations? We have a bottom line is income, a bottom line is expense, and the third bottom line is impact, right? We have a mission to accomplish. And we don't necessarily measure all of those things or have any clue which one of our programs actually fit, where it fits in this model. If you were to Google the nonprofit profitability map or matrix, there is a open source Excel spreadsheet. It's very complicated, but it's a nice little exercise to go through. And what it does is it forces you to identify all of your programs. And for some of you, that's really hard. You actually can't identify what your programs are. Spoiler alert, that's a problem. Okay? So you're going to identify all of your functions, including operations, including fundraising events. And you're going to measure every single thing that you do along a profit margin. Is it a net gain or a net loss? And you're going to measure it based on its impact. The hard part is that your impact can't be what you say. It has to actually be the impact of that program. So you can have a really like, hey, we're going to feed a whole bunch of people, and when we have our pantry, 3 people show up. Guess what? Not high impact, right? You are not producing that program with excellence, and your community would say that you're not producing that program with excellence. So if you're not producing a program with excellence, it doesn't have the impact you think it does. So you're measuring everything on a profit margin and an impact margin. Your best programs are these: high impact programs that are directly tied to your mission, and guess what? They make you money. They're not operating at a loss. You have a whole bunch, most of us, have a whole bunch of programs that are high impact, perfect implementation, excellent implementation, amazing for our program, doesn't make us a dime. Okay, that's fine, because we have fundraising events, right? That probably have nothing to do with our mission, but they make us some money. And then we have this, which has nothing to do with our mission and loses us money. If you were to actually do the analysis, most of your events are probably down here, okay? And you would actually map out all the programs that you do on this line. And you would be able to say, I wonder if this program, minor impact, doesn't make us any money, maybe we should stop doing that. Maybe this data helps us identify how we use our resources better. And then definitely, if anything winds up here, I don't care if you love the spaghetti dinner. It's done. It's over. We're not doing it anymore. It's a drain on everything that we're doing. And I think that this is a really amazing discussion. Again, it's really hard for some of us because we can't even identify what our actual programs are, much less identify whether or not they're meeting our mission, delivered with excellence, and operating at a profit. But this is an excellent, excellent conversation. Questions or thoughts? Okay. See, I didn't know what tools you needed me to bring. Oh, go ahead. So you're going to Google the nonprofit profitability matrix. Sometimes it's called the nonprofit profitability map. And there is a Google spreadsheet that will, with full instructions, there's articles on it. I think there's even books by now, but this concept, again, this has amazing questions for you to ask your board and ask your leadership. Where are we? Does that program make a profit? Are we delivering that program with excellence? Okay? Okay. Evaluating your executive director. This is not exactly fair. Some of you have hired somebody that has come up through the programmatic vein of your organization. They used to run programs. They've never managed a budget. They've never managed people before, and they're a year into their job. What those people need is professional development. They need access to information in which to get better. So while I'm saying this, don't go fire your executive director that's been on the job for 6 months, right? They need support and understanding, and they need to understand the tools that are available to them. But your executive director and their team should be able to develop a budget and maintain the budget. Now, especially if your organization is new to budgeting and you don't have any historical figures to build a budget off of, it's a guess, right? So just like any other plan, we're guessing how it's going to turn out. Allow your executive director to say, this is a guess. I actually have no idea, but it's practice. We're learning how to plan. So your executive director should be able to figure out how to present you with the annual strategic plan that is, in fact, a budget. Manage cash flow and communicate whether or not there's issues with cash flow. There's a lot of things beyond every executive director's control. Manage assets. Assets are staff. Assets are board. Assets are wisdom. Assets are things you purchase, things that you get rid of. Communicate financial status and issues to the board and find creative or new funding sources. This is not easy, especially if your executive director is also delivering programs. So we need to find ways to support our executive director in which to do this, okay? But these are some of the things that should go on the performance evaluation so that you can devote resources into professional development. If the person is not graded and doesn't have a goal, it's really hard to have that conversation ongoing. Make sense? Okay, my thing. Okay, any questions on this at all? Okay. Okay, let's talk about that 6 months of operating cash in the bank. Yes. Yes.
So with the executive director evaluation, you were talking about supporting the executive director versus, some of these skills. Can you talk a little bit about how to tell when a director needs more support versus they're just not fulfilling these responsibilities and need something else?
So, it's a great question. So one, the executive director should do a self-assessment during performance review time. The executive director, this is not a one and done, right? Which shouldn't happen just once a year. But certainly the how am I doing and where do I need help and being able to ask what support do I need either from the board or elsewhere in which to get my job done. 100% of the time, if you have not provided me a safe space to say that, and I will be penalized for any help that I ask for, even in a moment of weakness, I will not say it during my performance evaluation. So it needs to be again, that management map. If I have demonstrated that I am trustworthy because I've got a lot of things going on, but my volunteers are coming back, my staff is happy, I've got more donors, not enough, but at least I haven't lost any. I'm able to communicate the financial realities of our organization and the stresses of the organization, and I say that without crying in a board meeting. My board should say, what do you need from us? And if I cry, it's closed session. What can we do for you? Right? So if it's the opposite, if I don't have all that data, if my board doesn't have all that data, that I am transparent, I am giving accurate information, and my organization is otherwise healthy and I'm doing a pretty good job, right? If that exists, then ask me regularly, what can we do to help? What kind of support do you need? Do we need to go out and find more board members? If it's the opposite and I'm doing this to myself, knowingly or unknowingly, then it's a different conversation. Does that make sense? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Okay. Reserves. Some of you have them, most of you don't. How many of you have at least 1 month in the bank? How many of you have 2 months in the bank? How many of you have 3 months in the bank? 4, 5. Okay. I'm going to tell you that for certain you guys have more in the bank than you think you have. So when you look at your expenses, I just asked if we, so a couple of slides ago, if we needed to cut expenses, where would we cut and what would we cut? And would it cut deep or would it be like luxuries, right? So if we stopped making money, how long would we survive? And the math that you're doing is if we stop making money, we would keep spending at our same rate. And that is how we've calculated reserves. It's completely false. If you stopped making money, you would mitigate your expenses and you would have a much longer survival rate to figure things out. So your math is flawed. And if you're doing true risk management, having that conversation of, listen, the world stops. We lose a really big grant. We lose this. No more money's coming in. Have that conversation. No more money's coming in. We're done. No one's going to give us another dollar. What would we do to mitigate those expenses, and then how long would we last? Would we keep all of our staff? Would we downsize by half? Would we keep our executive director? Would we keep our executive director full-time? Would we keep the benefit packages? Would we, how quickly could we unload our office space? Could we sell office furniture? Would probably not. Everything we own has all been donated. It's not worth a thing. So if we have that conversation, we're actually in a much different, safer space. And the issue, though, is that if the money stopped coming in, would the board and the leadership have the courage to actually implement that reduced spending plan? That's a whole different conversation. But I guarantee you that you have more money in the bank than you think you do. And if you did do that math of no more money's coming in, what expenses would we mitigate, and recognize that you might have 12 or 18 or 2 years in the bank, my conversation to you, my strategic conversation is, why are you withholding services from your community? Why are you withholding mission growth and impact from your community? And I think those are really important questions. You may have really good answers, and my math around what you have in the bank could be very different from a comfortability standpoint. But I want you to know that they and their 6 months is false. It is not real, it is made up, just like your fiscal year, okay? It doesn't matter. You need to have that strategic conversation and understand your own risk tolerances and make different decisions. Okay?
Before those conversations happened because of COVID, right? The world came to an end. So you think that drove better conversations or no?
I don't know if they drove better. I think, COVID impacted staffing, right? There's a whole bunch of conversations we could have about using our reserves, going back to keeping good people that are implementing our mission with excellence. Like, how do we keep those people happy? How do we reduce stress and burnout? How do we ensure that our, during COVID, the calls that I got were from executive directors that would literally sit on the phone with me for an hour and sob. No words, just sitting there as they figured out how to save lives, keep their staff and their staff lives, it was all just crazy. But there's still trauma attached to that, and I don't think it's necessarily, I think what happened is that this conversation didn't happen during COVID. More than likely, boards stopped meeting during COVID than were meeting and having this conversation. So I think that this is, everybody's still looking at their toes, and they haven't necessarily looked up and figured out what to do next. There could be an anomaly here in the room, but that's what I think. There are boards that I know of that didn't meet for a year because they couldn't figure out Zoom.
We did Zoom, but we didn't get into just information.
Survival.
Yeah, it was hard.
Yep.
We didn't like Zoom.
Yep.
You can't really talk and bounce ideas off of everybody when you're not looking at them, at least in my generation. I'd rather be in person. But we didn't really get into this kind of thing.
Right.
It was just daily, correct, simple maintenance.
Yep.
What's going on currently.
Survival. Yep.
Survival, but
Are we still in a lifeboat?
Yeah.
Is the lifeboat, got a hole in it? Yep. Okay. I think we can do one more slide. Another really big question for your board. How much should you have in the bank and why? What is your goal? And how did you arrive at that formula? And I think, again, anyone that has a strategic plan as a nonprofit, you need to have a financial goal. And it needs to not only be how much do we need to keep safe, but how much more money do we need to grow our programs and build impact. Okay, it's 6:14. You want another break? Some people, yes. Raise your hand if you want a break. Okay, you get 5 minutes because that's all that's going to the bathroom. And then we're going to get into audits and 990s. All right, we're in the home stretch. How you doing? Have you learned anything? Yeah? Have we touched on how not to make people mad? Open, communicating, transparent, safe spaces. Have we worked at all on any organization? Have you kind of come away with some organizational tools or some budgeting tools? I'm going to give you a really big budgeting tool in a minute, but have I scratched that itch at all? Okay. And then some of you wanted to know where you were with best practices. Have I given you any indication of that? Okay. Have I given you some good questions to ask? Okay. And then how do we mitigate deficiencies? Have I given you any ideas yet?
Openness and assigning or having a finance committee that will, and you working with the finance committee if you're someone in charge.
Yeah.
Or on board.
Yeah.
Volunteer and try to.
It's a group conversation. It's a team sport. Finances is a team sport, and having a really solid conversation or saying as a statement, declarative statement, we can't go on this way. We're going to have to figure something else out. What is that, right? And again, it's easy to focus on let's have a fundraiser, let's have a spaghetti dinner, let's figure out how to make money. The harder conversation is how are we going to cut expenses. Okay, so let me just make sure. Am I near the end? 6:21. Yikers. Okay, I'm gonna talk fast. Okay, audits. How many of you get an audit done annually? Good. And your auditor is your best friend, yes?
No.
Okay, that needs to change, huh? Can be. Your auditor say it again? It's an open relationship. That person is not there as a police officer. That person, that auditor is not there to find wrongdoing. That auditor is there to give you, it's like a test. You're passing a test. And the test is it's your own open book test. An audit is, here are our policies. And the audit is, are you following your policies? And here's a whole bunch of ways that you could be doing it better. Somebody asked before the class started, how do we want our audit to be transparent and share with the community. You can, it's not required. Your 990 is a public-facing document. Your audit is an internal, this is really important, your audit is an internal process. You don't have to share that audit with anyone outside your organization. It's your own test, it's your own pressure test, and the auditor works for you, works for the board. And if we look at it like that, our auditor does become our best friend, teacher, educator, and mentor. What should I be doing better? Where should we be investing resources? For small organizations, you are going to have a, I've lost the word, somebody's going to have to give it to me. Not a note. Your auditor is going to give you feedback and some of it's bad. What's that called? A what? Help me. in the management letter, it will say you're out of compliance. Okay, findings. Thank you. And some of us are always going to have a finding that we don't have enough segregation of duties. And if your auditor is your friend, your auditor will say, and I don't think you should change that. Your staff is too small. It's too expensive to fully implement segregation of duties. You're mitigating the risk appropriately. Don't change it. Cool. Okay. And he's going to say that in the finding. You failed this, but don't change anything. And then there's some things that the auditor is going to say, you really need to address this. Okay? So audits are expensive, especially for nonprofits, because there's so much compliance that a nonprofit audit has to complete. So I don't know how much they are in your community. In my community, for any size organization, because the work is the same, you said 18,000? 18,000. I was going to say anywhere from 10 to 15. So that's a lot of money. You are not required to have an audit until you have more than 575, that's a memory, it could be 25, 575,000 in donations. So not earned revenue, not contracts. So for those of us that don't have federal dollars or state dollars, we're not mandated by any other foundation, think about that expense and what you could be doing with that money versus getting an audit, okay? It's a lot of money. And if you do get a $15,000 audit, make sure you're getting an audit. Because sometimes, I'm not saying that people try and take advantage of other people, but people take advantage of other people. And so sometimes you pay $15,000 for an audit and you get a compilation. They didn't come on site. If they are not reading your board meeting minutes, if they didn't ask you for your policies, you are not getting an audit. An audit includes, did your board follow the policies that are identified, and can you prove it? If they're not doing that, you're not getting your money's worth. You got a compilation or a review, okay? Okay. How many of you are going to get an audit? Not very many of you. Okay. Any questions about the audit process, making friends with your auditor? Okay, the 990. The purpose and intent of the 990 is to prove to the federal government that you know what you're doing and that you are still a nonprofit organization. So some of us, like, it's going to test the public support test. Everybody know what the public support test is? Public support test says that no single donor can give you more than 10% or 33%, because it is the IRS and they do like to make it confusing with lots of asterisks. So 10% or 25% or 33%, depends on their formula, that your income, one person is not giving you that much money over the course of time. So you can get a bequest, someone can die and leave you $1 million. No problem at all. That person can't be alive and give you $1 million twice in a row, and that your budget or your income sources are only $100,000 normally, okay? That will change your tax exemption status. So you need to be aware and actually turn away gifts if it's going to change your tax exemption from being a public charity to a foundation. And you need to be aware of that, because if you're asking for grants to come in and you're not managing your public support, it will change your tax exemption status if they say yes, because it's not the foundation's job to figure out whether or not it's going to breach your public support test. Make sense? Anybody need more information? Okay. So it's a public document. If you go on guidestar.org, I think I've shared this with you, you can see any 990 from any nonprofit organization across the country. And GuideStar is actually paid by the IRS to have all of these 990s. This is your transparency document. And it will give your names as board members. It will, if you look at nonprofit networks, you can see how much I make. You can see how much we brought in from grants. You can see how we spent money. You can see where we spent money. You can see all of our formulas. It is a document that proves to the public that we are doing what we said we were doing and that our money is being spent on our mission. But it also tests your governance as a board member. So these are actual questions on the 990. So if you are having someone else complete your 990 and they're not asking you questions about some of these things, they might be answering wrong. So did you update your bylaws? If you updated your bylaws in the last 12 months, in between the last time that you did your 990, you need to be marking, yes, we did. And they will probably ask you to upload the copy of the bylaws, and that is your informing the federal government that you made changes. It will ask whether or not any board member has a family or business relationship with any other person on your board. Is there a conflict of interest that exists? Is there an opportunity for collusion that exists? It will ask if the completed copy of the 990 has been presented to the board members, because it's their document. There's actually a requirement that says the board has seen it and approves of the 990 before it's submitted. Huh. And then it's asking you, because remember I told you you needed these documents, does the organization have a conflict of interest policy, whistleblower policy, and document retention policy? If you have more than $50,000 that you've generated and are filling out a full 990, this is one of maybe, oh help me, 75, 80 questions around governance that is on that document. You as board members should receive it and see it, okay? Okay, so other things. You have the 990 every year, you have the state audit, the state annual report every year, you need to be following GAAP, you need to accurately reflect your revenue and expenses, and you need to follow any funder guidance. It's 6:30. I could spend all day, like until midnight, on this slide, but I just want to make sure, and again, I see you're all like, some of you are like, This is a lot. This is a lot. So is there anything on here that you want me to stop and pause? This slide is for your information. We can have a different conversation one-on-one if you need any more info. Okay? Good? Okay. So record retention. This goes back to organization. You need to, your document retention schedule and policy will tell you how long you need to keep things, like receipts, like bank records, like contracts. But all of your paper, and I'm going to use that word loosely because there are some organizations that have been able to convert everything to electronic and don't have files anymore. Some files, but very minimal. So when I say paper, it could just be your electronic file structure. But all of that stuff needs to be kept. So your receipts need to be attached to your credit card statement in order, right? Somebody needs to sign that, pen to ink or electronic signature. You need all copies of any contracts that encumber the organization. And if the executive director doesn't have authority to sign those contracts, which would be written in your financial policies, you would have the appropriate documentation, board meeting minutes with motions that the executive director or someone can sign that paperwork. Okay? Lots of things. Questions? Your document retention schedule will tell you how long you keep those things. Typically, a physical copy or the original copy for a year, and then either 3 or 7 years after that, unless your licensing regulator tells you different. And some of those things, like HR records might have a different length as well. I think former employees, you have to keep those records for 7 years. Anything that is that could have risk management or insurance implications, you would keep for your insurance policies, documented time. So you should create a document retention schedule that follows everybody's, like it's just a cheat sheet, right, of how long you keep things. Questions about that? Okay, so you should also have financial policies and procedures around investment. If you have 6 months of reserves and it's not in an interest-bearing account making you money, come on. Everybody and their brother is often in a really good deal to take your money and allow you to make some money. So you need an investment policy. What's your risk tolerance? Why aren't you putting a month of your reserves in the stock market to make a ton of money, right? Would you have that high risk, low risk, medium risk? You need banking policies. Who can get in and make a change to your bank account, meaning add a payee or a payor? Is that written down in your policies? Who has spending authority and at what level? As a staff person, I can only sign checks under a certain amount. I have to have my treasurer sign checks over a certain amount. One, it allows for further scrutiny, especially if that bill is pretty big, right? So I have normal authority, and then there's authority outside of mine. And your accounting method, cash or accrual, what's your chart of accounts? Procedures. You have a whole list of procedures. Internal controls. How do you accept cash? How quickly does it need to be deposited? What's the record keeping behind that deposit? How do you disperse your money? How often do you write checks? Do you have a policy that says that when you get a bill, you pay it immediately? Or when you get a bill and it's due in 45 days, you pay it in 44? Do you retain the control of your cash for as long as possible, or do you get a bill off your desk as quickly as possible? What's your philosophy? And then segregation of duties. How do you make sure that there's multiple people that are kind of watching the shop and that no one person has full control over all things? And I'll go through segregation of duties in a minute. So internal controls is like your insurance policy, but just like an audit, internal controls is not going to protect you from embezzlement. If somebody wants to steal your money, they will. Your internal controls need to be able to identify that money is missing or something has happened as quickly as possible. I want to say that again. Your internal controls cannot prevent someone from taking your money. Your internal controls can identify it as quickly as possible and stop it. So that's the benefit. I want you to level set and be realistic about what your internal controls and your audit is going to do. Your audit is not automatically going to find embezzlement. And I hope we might not have time, but in your handouts, you have an embezzlement worksheet, a risk reduction worksheet that you should go through, might even want your whole board to go through. There's also a budgeting tool, a budgeting checklist that might be helpful to you. Segregation of duties, it's simply ensuring that one person doesn't have sole control over deposits and expenses, that they can't take the money and spend the money, that there's a full kind of circle around that. Again, many of your organizations are too small and can't, like, I think the number is you need 5 individuals, 5 people that to manage full segregation of duties. Most of you do not have those kind of resources, but just be aware. And again, sometimes you can't segregate all of the duties. You're mitigating your risk. Sorry, whoa. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit, I don't know why that went all the way there. Okay, so again, you have all of these slides, so I'm not going to read them to you, but there's some checklists of what your internal controls can do within your organization, and again, some ways to mitigate all those risks. When we talk about embezzlement, I want you to know that most of the time in a nonprofit, it's not cash. Embezzlement shows up, like when you look at your budget, what is the most expensive thing on your budget? People, staff. So it's going to be PTO theft. It's going to be inflation or mismanagement of overuse of overtime. It's going to be somebody walks into your organization and hands you 4 Tigers tickets to give to a raffle, but they never get to the raffle. That person might use those tickets, right? Like donations are then used for personal use rather than the organization's use. You might notice for embezzlement that staff are borrowing things from the office and using them for personal gain or use. Food disappears from from the refrigerator if you're provide food or a residential organization. That their reimbursements are false or inflated. That they're agreeing to contracts for kickbacks. So just recognize that the embezzlement doesn't always come from the accounting department. Inflated expense reimbursements, right? So just watch again, your budget is a strategic plan, and if you are watching if you're planning for travel, if you're planning for purchases, if you have a system to accept donations, all of those things, it's going to help mitigate. it's not going to help prevent. Okay? If somebody in your organization is going to steal from you, they're going to steal from you. And so here's a sample of ways that you might identify a staff that was potentially at risk of needing, especially in a nonprofit organization where we don't pay a lot. So if someone is facing a lot of debt or has a lot of increased need, that's going to help them possibly justify that the organization owes them more than they can do. There is the perceived opportunity, like I think I can get away with it, and that their relationship with the organization has suffered. So when you have these three things going on, you might be at higher risk of embezzlement. And the statistics say that all three usually are present. So, and then we can see that there is, analytical symptoms like unusual changes in your profit percentages, or your terrain begins to change without explanation, that you have employees that suddenly their lifestyle has changed, or you're starting to get some feedback from the community or others that something's not right. This is a great question that my auditor always asks us, and I love it. I just absolutely love it. And the question he said, if someone is going to steal from the organization, how would they do it, and what area is most likely? And in my audit, my auditor asked that question of all of my staff. So he will sit in a closed room and he will say, if someone's going to steal, who's it going to be and how are they going to do it? And my staff gets so uncomfortable. And I'm like, no, this is such a good test. This is a pressure test. Where would it arrive? Because we all love each other, right? And we're all like a great team. We would absolutely not do any harm. But that question is a game changer. It's like, okay, so if somebody's going to steal, it would have to be in this manner, and I don't know how they would do it. Anyways, it's a cool conversation. If you're in a safe place, right? If everyone in the room or every staff member knows it's not happening, it's a cool conversation. Okay, on our website, in our online store, there is a tool called Build a Nonprofit Budget. And it has a Excel spreadsheet, because I know that's where you're starting. It has a tutorial, it has a sample chart of accounts, and it has a step-by-step guide to build your first budget. If you need that, it's there, it's free of charge. The next three slides, which are, and I want to give you time for Q&A. The next three slides, which you can read, depending on where you are in your life cycle, it will tell you where you should be in terms of best practices and what financial systems you've deployed. So for grassroots, you're beginning to expand your funding resources. You're beginning to institute formal accounting policies. So there's a slide for maturing and a slide for stable and a list there that you can kind of check yourself around. Okay, what do I want to say on this one? So some of you, your financial accounting and your bylaws might indicate how your budget is managed and approved. Please remember that all of those policies, finance, bylaws, even some of your governing policies will have accounting implications. Just be aware of that and build it in. My bylaws, if you've gone on our website and downloaded some of our policies, all of our policies on our website are the ones that we use. Our bylaws say that I need supermajority to pass my budget, but as soon as my budget is passed by supermajority, I as the executive have full authority to facilitate my budget. And then I have to operate within 10% discrepancy throughout the year. So if I'm going to spend more than that or expense is going to come in under, I have to go back to the board for an amendment. So it's built in, that accounting is built in. Okay. 6:47. We have 13 minutes for evaluation and for questions. I know I raced through those last slides, but I really wanted to give you time to process and identify what you might take away from this session. So first, what questions do you have remaining?
Well, I think you were wonderful. You really gave us a lot to think about, a to-do list and things to follow up on. It was fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. No one's sleeping. Everybody is gonna ring your, just go home, have a glass of wine, relax. It's all gonna be okay. Yeah. I know it was a fire hose, but this is, again, one of those topics where I don't know where you need me. And so, again, for the last 10 minutes, if I didn't touch on something you wanted me or expected me to, I can now. Yes.
For fundraising.
Yeah.
What percentage should you spend on fundraising? Let's say you bring in so much money the year before. What percentage of that would you spend? Do you spend 10%?
On an activity or on a party?
But it's our biggest.
The biggest part.
And it brings in our donors and shows them our mission and works that way. So.
See what I have to deal with?
So, well, okay, so you're asking like, this is a complicated answer, because fundraising is going to go into your operating expenses, and it's going to change that ratio. So when the community looks at your 990 has a ratio. How much overhead did you spend? And so if you're breaching 35% of all of your income is coming in to overhead, then that is a conversation I think your organization should have. Now, we're also talking about tradition and what donors and funders expect of nonprofits, which is actually unrealistic, okay? But there is a conversation, like some funders won't fund an organization that has more than 15% overhead, right? So there's a conversation about what your donors expect and what they're expecting of your organization, and your question about the fundraiser my answer is impacted by the other ratios on your 990. And so if that's going to tip the scale and you're going to raise, let's say you raise $100,000 on this event, but you spend $50,000, and that, I'm just saying, we're just using round numbers. But I think you need to look at the whole picture for that, and then just make sure that you're being appropriate and prudent.
And you're trying to grow it, so each year it does grow.
Yep.
I just want to budget.
Yep.
So that I'm not doing
Yep.
that.
Yep. And food expenses are higher and all of those things. But the question that you asked is more complicated than I can provide, which, but if you're going to force me, I would say no more than 25%. But many events cannot reach that, and that they've added a marketing outreach component, which skews all of that and fudges the numbers so that board members can spend more money. Okay.
May I ask, though, does it matter, would it be determined differently if that was her main income to run the organization for the year?
It won't change the 990 operating and overhead. It won't.
If that's what they're relying to.
So the 990 is asking for management expenses, fundraising expenses, and program expenses. And no matter where it is, you're still going to show the community that you spent a lot of money, more money, right? That's what we don't want, is that you spent a lot of money on overhead and less money on programs. And so that's the number I want you to be aware of.
The percentage that you, the amount of money you spend to make another amount of money, they're not regulating you.
No, they're not.
You are open to use it as you wish, even if you spend 50,000 to get 100,000.
But it's going to show up. It's going to show up on your 990 that you did that.
Yes, okay.
And that, and the general public, that's one of the reasons why the general public don't trust us, because sometimes when we look at the numbers, it looks like all we're doing is making a lot of money to pay a lot of money.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Okay.
Does that all make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I was just going to say is I don't have any questions for you, but I have questions to go back with.
Good.
And I feel like now I have the confidence to keep pushing for answers. Like I have that right to know. If I'm going to be on this board, I have a right to understand this process that's been in place.
Have I showed you my tattoo?
No.
My tattoo says, "Ask a better question." Love and hugs, Dad. But ask a better question. So if you're not getting the answer that you think you are expecting, the question is flawed. Keep asking a better question. Others? You're in shock? I don't know if that's a good thing. So tools, right? We talked about the management map. We talked about the nonprofit profitability matrix. We talked about the budget tool. I mentioned TechSoup briefly. Does everyone know what TechSoup is? TechSoup is a nonprofit organization that provides software at a low expense. So like QuickBooks, the nonprofit version, if you were to go to the store, Amazon, it would be like $125, $150, $175, something like that. TechSoup, it's $50. You need Microsoft Office, it's free on TechSoup. You need a Zoom account, there's an administrative fee, but you get it like 50% off for the rest of the year. So TechSoup, you have to go on and apply, set up your account, and then you can purchase Adobe products or, you know, whatever you need.
Those are for nonprofits?
TechSoup is a nonprofit. If you need bookkeeping support, there are nonprofits in your community that would gladly talk to you about how much it would cost for you to pay their bookkeeper to do your books. And it would be an income stream for them and most likely save you money. It's a good way to collaborate and partner. They might even be able to do more than that for a tiny bit. 5 minutes.
Anything for me from previous? I mean, I'm way under 50,000, so I don't really have to do all of this year.
No. So again, remember growth and capacity. So your 990 is 10 questions, right? So you don't have, your 990 isn't what I shared. That's the full 990. In this, this is where you are, right? So, and you don't get to move to a maturing organization until you're able to do that. So you get to stay right here in a happy little grassroots space. And you can say, I can't hire an experienced accountant, so I'm still going to use an Excel spreadsheet, and I'm going to practice collecting my expenses. I'm going to practice tracking my income. All good.
Very good.
And the 990, what is it, less than 50,000? Postcard is 990.
Correct. Anything over is a more complicated form.
So take it over 50,000, send it on a postcard.
Yep. That says that you didn't make more than 50,000. Nancy, final thoughts.
I just want to say thank you to Regina.
Yes.
You're welcome. Always a pleasure.
This has been just a great series. I'm really appreciative that you all have attended, some of you multiple times, engagement. I've learned a lot. You know, I think sometimes people think, oh, you're the community foundation, you've got this all down, but, you know, we're like every other organization, and so I've learned something every single session. Don't ask us to do your bookkeeping. We're actually low staffed right now, so we're just keeping our own head above water. But I really appreciate it. I know Nonprofit Network has just a whole host of resources, so please, it's a membership organization. I think they provide a ton of value to our sector here in Michigan. Things are going to change. I want to thank, first of all, the Ed Tech Center. So the Pierre County ISD has allowed us to use this facility free of charge. And so if you see anyone from the ISD, Mr. Zott, they've been really appreciative and helpful to us using the Ed Tech Center, as well as our funding partners, American Charitable Foundation, Peer Development Corporation, United Way, and obviously us. Everything is being recorded, so those of you that might not know or didn't notice the big camera in the back of the room, all you have to do is go on YouTube. Pierre County Community Foundation is our account, and you have access to this recording. It should be up within a week, and the 3 previous recordings. So go back, find more information as your board changes, as your staff changes. If you're thinking about those board discussions, maybe find a little piece of it, put it back in the context of when you first heard it, and then maybe have that be part of your board development. So please take the survey. I know Regina's going to talk about that. It's very important to them to be able to provide the best programming possible. I will send that link out again. There's a QR code. I'll send a link. And also I will send a follow-up survey in a couple weeks for getting your feedback for what you want next year. We're going to try and put some funding in place so that we can continue these conversations.
And so, for example, if you miss the board governance session, December 15th, we're having a virtual board governance session, free for members, $15 for non-members, but you can say, go and listen. We have a whole host of other workshops available and on-demand workshops and tools. So, and I think that we're adding you can always, I always say delete, don't unsubscribe, but you'll probably start getting emails from us so that you have access to all those resources. Thank you. Drive safe. Don't hit the deer.